In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the front ball joints on this Ford Excursion. We do have to replace both at the same time. They sit on the knuckle and we'll have to pull the wheel bearing off for this, so let's get started. Use a 21mm socket and remove all 8 lug nuts, and then we can pull the wheel off. We have to disconnect the ABS sensor wire, and to do that we actually have to move the fender liner out of the way a little bit because it goes up behind it and up all the way to right about here. So let's take the fasteners off so we can at least peel away the back of it to get access. Use a 5.5mm socket to remove the screws that hold the fender liner onto the fender itself. There are supposed to be several. My next one is actually a Phillips head, but it's supposed to be a 5.5, just like the previous one. On the inside right here, there's an 8mm headed screw or bolt. Remove that. Keep following the edge along. You'll see another 5.5mm screw at the front. And further in the front, underneath the fender liner, an 8mm headed screw. Now pull the fender liner slightly down. Also push it back at the same time so you can get it off of the fender. Take that off. Following the ABS sensor wire up, you'll see where it plugs in, and this is why we had to remove the fender liner. Push on that tab and disconnect it from the electrical connector. Following it down on the frame, let's unhook it from the retainer. Just use a trim tool and pop it off. And then continue following it along. On the brake hose, you'll see it's clipped on. Just pull on the wire, that'll unclip it from the brake hose. Just like that. Now let's take the caliper and bracket assembly off of the front axle. Use a 21mm socket, remove the top bolt and the bottom bolt, and we'll take the whole thing, put it back on the leaf spring so it doesn't hang by the brake hose while we do the work. With this bolt taken out, leave it in a couple threads so it can hold the caliper while we take off the bottom. Now support the caliper with one hand, and with the other take that bolt out. With that out, you can remove the caliper and bracket assembly, flip it over, and we'll put it right on that leaf spring, just like that. Now you can remove the rotor. If it's seized, use a hammer, tap between the lug studs to break it free. Hopefully yours is not though. Set it aside. Now we have to remove the locking hub assembly. To do this, you'll need a 3mm hex bit. Sometimes it's a 4mm. I don't have either. What I do have though is a T20 torque socket, which will fit perfectly in here, and for very low torque applications will work just fine. And I'm going to remove all of these screws that'll allow me to pull the locking hub assembly off. When it comes to these locking hubs, if you have the factory vacuum hubs, it'll just have a snap ring around it. Ours are no longer factory hubs. They are manual locking hubs with a few Allen bolts around them. And removing those will get the cover off. Sometimes these screws are stuck in here. This one is severely corroded. What I'm going to do is take a punch that fits on the outside of the head of the screw. Just give it a tap. Sometimes that helps break it free. Now take the cap off of the locking hub mechanism. Continuing with our locking hubs, because like I said, these are no longer factory hubs. We have a ring that goes around the entire perimeter. Typically with the factory ones, the entire thing pulls out. So what you want to do at this point, if you have these Warner hubs, you are going to have to stick a pick or a screwdriver behind this ring and just pop it out so that you can unclip it the rest of the way. There it goes. Grab it with some pliers and just pull it out very gently. Try not to bend it or damage it so we can reuse it. All right, there's that. Now the entire hub assembly should want to slide out. However, it is kind of tricky to hold on to, so if you can't get it with some pliers, what you can sometimes do is stick the Allen bolts back in and use those to pull. Take this out. This is what it should look like if you still had that manual or the factory locking hub with the snap ring. Once you pull the entire thing out, you'll be left with this. Use some snap ring pliers and remove the snap ring that holds on all of these washers. Squeeze that. Be careful so it doesn't go flying. Set that aside safely. We will be reusing it. Now you can take off all of these washers, which if you need a magnet for these, you can use that. There's a metal washer, then a plastic washer that is basically a hex cutout like a nut. And then this is actually a third washer back here. Need a magnet for that one. There it is. Set that aside. From the back side of the knuckle, you'll see 4 21mm mounting nuts, 2 on one side, 2 on the other side. We'll have to remove all 4 to get this wheel bearing undone off of the knuckle. Doesn't matter where you start. This one came off with a stud, that's totally fine. Okay, there it is. All right, one more to go. All right, there's our last one. Now pull the wheel bearing off. And there it is. Take that backing shield with it. Now let's remove the cotter pin off the tie rod. Sometimes these get stuck. If that's the case, just cut it flush with the nut. Use a 21mm socket to remove this mounting nut. And now we're going to use a hammer, tap the knuckle right here. That should separate the stud from the knuckle. There we go. Remove the tie rod stud from the knuckle. Use a pry bar. Let's pry the axle out of the differential. There we go. From the front, pull the axle shaft through. This is the seal that's going to have to come with it. And slide it through gently. This is the other seal that seals up the differential side. And there you go. Let's remove the ball joint cotter pin at the top. This one's fairly rusted in place. I'm going to just cut it flush with the mounting nut. I will try to pry this end out. However, sometimes that's not going to work. And if that happens, just cut it flush. Looks like this one is coming out, so that's great. If you have to cut it flush, you're just going to have to hammer the socket right over and basically cut it. It's going to cut it as the nut spins. Use a 28mm socket, remove this mounting nut. Leave it on a couple threads just so it can support the ball joint when we finally get ready to remove these. So let's do the same to the bottom now. For the lower ball joint, the factory nut is going to be a 1 5/16 socket or 33mm. You could use a 34 or a 1 3/8, but that's going to be a little too big and you risk rounding it off. So loosen this up. Take that off. And once you're sure that it's completely off, once again, leave it on a couple threads so it can support the ball joint while we take it off. Now let's use a hammer, tap on the axle here, and that's going to break the studs of the ball joints free from where they're mounted. Both nuts are only partially threaded on. Here we go. I'm going to remove this lower nut now. They're both loose. The top one just needs to go down a little bit more. There we go. Support your knuckle. Remove the top nut now. Set it aside. Pull this down. And there's the knuckle with the ball joints. Let's remove the lower ball joint first. To do that, since this one's greasable, I'm going to take an 8mm socket and remove the grease fitting so that we can press flat on this area. Set that aside. There's also a snap ring that holds on this ball joint, or locks it in, I should say. So take some snap ring pliers and spread this apart to unlock it. There we go. Here's the ball joint press setup that I have. The press itself, an adapter, and a receiving cup. This ball joint will go straight up through the top, and of course the threaded rod of the ball joint press that's going to press directly on the bottom of the ball joint, pushing it into my receiving cup. Here we go. It stopped, which most likely means that I can't push it anymore before it reaches the end of it, but at this point it is most of the way through, so that's good. Use a hammer, tap it the rest of the way. There we go. Same setup for the top, and this is why I wanted to remove the lower first so that the rod for the ball joint press can poke through the bottom. It's a lot easier to do it this way. There are other ways to do it, but this is how I'm going to do it. A receiving cup, adapter, and the ball joint press, pressing it right up and out. Here we go. There it is. It's important to clean the area that the ball joint mounts in. You want all corrosion and debris out of there. I do have a ridge of rust built up around the bottom, so I want to get that out of there. Use a wire wheel. You can use a little bit of fine sandpaper or whatever you have, wire brush, that'll clean it up. Do the same on the lower ball joint. To install the ball joints, we're going to start with the top ball joint. On either one, we're going to have to remove the boot. And this is so that we can press on it and press it in. You don't want to press on the boot, but you do need access to this ridge that sits right here below the boot. So with a pocket screwdriver, gently pry it up. You don't want to bend this too much. There's a metal ring inside of the boot that's going to help it stay sturdy, basically, and seal up. So you want to just go slow, go all the way around. Pry it up little by little. Eventually it'll pop off. There we go. Now you can pull it off the rest of the way. Set that aside in a clean area. To make installation just a little bit easier, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the bottom of the ball joint. That way as it slides in, it's more likely to slide in easier and stay even, stay straight. You don't want it to go in at an angle. This will just help it. Plus it'll prevent corrosion from building up. I'm going to do the same on the knuckle side, just a nice thin layer, once again, for the same reason. Take the ball joint and start it in, and now let's find the adapter, the cup, that fits right on this ridge, and another flat one to support the ball joint press right here. Here's my setup. I have this flipped around actually, so I'm going to press on the top of the ball joint with this adapter cup that fits perfectly on the lip of the ball joint, and then a flat one here that's a little bit recessed so that it can basically receive the ball joint as it pokes through. It's only going to poke through about 1 millimeter, but still, you want a little bit of space there. So let's press it in. Make sure it goes in straight, not at an angle. If it does go at an angle, stop and try to correct it with a hammer or press it out if needed. That's completely bottomed out. Give this a couple taps with a hammer to vibrate the metal and help it seat a little bit better in case it is not. Now remove your ball joint press. And there's the ball joint. Let's put the boot on. Slide it over. I'm going to take that same cup that I used to install the ball joint because it fits perfectly over this, and tap it on. Now take the lower ball joint, pop the boot off of this one just like we did the top. And same exact way, we're going to install this going from the top of the knuckle straight down. Here's the setup for the bottom. We have the ball joint, of course, the ball joint press, a cup that fits perfectly on the outer lip that's going to push it down, a receiving cup with an adapter so that the ball joint press can press on this. Here we go. That's bottomed out. Give this a couple taps to seat it in case it's not. And remove your press. All right, let's put the boot on the lower ball joint. Slide it on. Try to seat it all the way down. If you need help, use a cup and tap it on. That's fully seated. Lock this lower ball joint in with the snap ring that's provided. All right. Try to have your hand over it at all times so it doesn't go flying. Once you spread it apart enough, it should fit on here. Just make sure it's fully seated. And there you go, that's locked in. If there's cleaning to do over here on the axle side, go ahead and do that. If needed, wire brush inside of the holes where the ball joints go if there's a lot of corrosion. I did a little bit of that and applied a little bit of anti-seize. It is optional, but this vehicle lives in a very rust-prone climate, so I wanted to make sure it's not going to continue corroding. Stick both of the ball joints through. Sometimes this alignment metal bushing will pop out. That's normal. Put one of the mounting nuts on, whichever one you can reach first. All right. With this on, let's turn it, put the lower mounting nut on. Let's torque the top ball joint. Doesn't really matter which one you do first. I just found it easier to do this one first. 100 foot-pounds is the torque for this castle nut. All right, that's tight, but this being a castle nut, we have to line up the slot for the cotter pin. It looks like mine needs to go a little bit more. You never want to loosen these to line them up, no matter how close they are. So I'm going to tighten it just a little more. Perfect, right there. Install your cotter pin right through, and then of course bend it over to lock it in. Now the bottom ball joint nut is torqued to 101 foot-pounds. This is just a locking nut, no cotter pin required, so you want to make sure it's nice and tight. Now it's important to clean the knuckle before everything goes back together. Right back here, there's a seal that seals up the axle. On the axle itself, where the shaft goes in, there's another seal back there. But regardless, also the wheel bearing area needs to be cleaned, so make sure you get all corrosion off of everywhere. You can use a wire brush, a wire wheel on a drill, sanding disc, some sandpaper, whatever you have that'll get this cleaned up. Once you're done, rinse it down with some brake parts cleaner. Apply some anti-seize to the surface that you cleaned. Take your axle shaft, slide it in. Try to be as careful as you can. At this point, you might need to twist it a little bit to line it up with the splines. You can also use a rubber mallet on the end of it to help drive it in. All right, that's in all the way. Install the tie rod stud back in the knuckle. Put the mounting nut back on. Snug it up and torque it to 67 foot-pounds. That's torqued, but this being a castle nut, you want to continue tightening until the slot lines up with the cotter pin on the nut side. You never want to loosen this to get it lined up. Get your cotter pin through and bend it over to lock it in. Because the fasteners for our wheel hub came off together, stud and nut, I'm going to separate them by putting them in my vise and removing the nut off of the stud. And then I'm going to put all 4 studs back in the wheel hub on the back of it. I'm going to snug them up a little bit with some pliers, and this will be ready for installation. It helps to put a little bit of silicone paste or grease on the O-ring that's on the side or around the wheel bearing on the back of it. That way it'll slide in a lot easier. Now put the ABS wire through the backing shield. And try to line up the backing shield with the studs, and of course have the ABS wire come through, just like that. Lift this up so it's out of the way. Now take the wheel hub and bearing assembly with the backing shield, slide it on, just like that. Press it on all the way. Right now it's actually not seated. We need that yellow O-ring to seat all the way. And that's where it's helpful to have the silicone paste on it. You can take a small rubber mallet, just help it go in all the way by tapping it. All right, that's slid in all the way. Let's start on the mounting nuts on the back of the wheel hub now. With all of them started, let's snug them up in a cross pattern, and then we're also going to torque them in a cross pattern, but let's snug them first. The torque on these is 133 foot-pounds, also in a cross pattern like I mentioned earlier. On the outside of the hub, we're going to have to put some grease right here where the splines of the locking hub ride, as well as on the axle. There is some already on the axle, so we'll just add some more. You obviously don't have to fill this, but you do have to coat these splines. That way everything can mesh together properly when you engage and disengage your locking hub. Next, get your combination of metal washer, plastic washer, and then metal washer again. Slide this over all the way in. Let's put the snap ring back on. Careful so it doesn't go flying. Once again, these are under quite a bit of pressure. Push it all the way in, and when you feel it seat, let go of your snap ring pliers and double check it that it's seated all the way around. Now it's time to put the locking hub back. Line it up with the splines. There we go, just guide it in place. If needed, you can guide it in with a rubber mallet. Just make sure you're careful. Try to tap on the outer edge just to seat it fully. Because we have this aftermarket locking hub, we're going to have to put this ring in, which is what locks it in. Now, for these particular ones, what you want to do, it's the best idea to do this, is to line up the end of it on the outer part with the cutout on it. This is going to allow you to remove it a whole lot easier next time this has to be serviced. And this, you're kind of just going to have to push into position. Just bring it around just like this. There it goes. And that is now locked in. We have the end of it lined up right here so that next time we can just grab it and pull it down. On this particular model of locking hub, we have the cap that needs to go on. There's either an O-ring around it, or you're going to want to put a little bit of RTV right in this groove here where it contacts the hub so it can seal up completely from any water or debris that might get in there. At this point, line this up and now install your bolts. Of course, if you have the original locking hub, you wouldn't have these bolts. You would just have a snap ring that goes around it, and you'd want to put that on to lock it in. Snug these up gently in a cross pattern. Give them just a little bit extra by hand, not even an eighth of a turn. You just want them snug. There's 6 of them, and they hold on pretty tight on here. Just want to make sure they're even and that this cap is well seated. All right. At this point, you'd want to clean up the surface of the hub. Mine is new, so I don't have to worry about it, but for yours, take a wire brush or sanding disc and remove any rust that might be built up around it so the rotor can sit nice and flush when it goes on. Now let's coat the hub surface in some anti-seize. Avoid spraying it on the lug studs or getting it on if you have the brushed kind. If you get any on, that's no big deal, just wipe it off, but don't load them up with it. My rotor is new, so I don't have to worry about rust here, but if yours is used, sand it down, clean it off so that it has a nice flat surface to mount on the hub with. Install your rotor. If you got a bunch of fingerprints on it, clean off both the outer and the inner braking surface with some brake parts cleaner and a clean paper towel or a rag. To hold the rotor on a little bit better, I'm going to use an old axle nut and a lug nut and basically squish it up against the hub temporarily so it doesn't flop around while I try to put on the caliper. It doesn't have to be tight, just snug. Install the caliper. Have your bolts ready, start them on. Snug them up. The torque for these two is between 141 foot-pounds and 191 foot-pounds. I'm just going to go for a higher number, 190. Resecure the ABS sensor to the brake line or brake hose. Both of these clips. And then on the frame right here, there's an oval slot. That's where this push clip will go in. Make sure you push it in all the way. That way it's nicely secured. Go up right below the fender and plug in the ABS sensor. Make sure it clicks. Let's install the fender liner. Be careful not to pinch any of the wires that are there as you try to install this. That way they don't break. Push it further back than you want it, just so you can bring it up underneath the fender. And once you do that, you should be able to push it up in place. Just like that. Let's reinstall the bolts that hold it on. There's an 8mm headed bolt at the front. Another 8mm bolt goes right back here. I have to push this up a little bit to have it lined up. I gotta. And let's put in all of the 5.5mm screws that go along the fender. Let's get the wheel back on. Put on all 8 lug nuts. We'll bottom them out in a cross pattern to seat the wheel evenly. And then also in a cross pattern, we're going to torque them to 148 foot-pounds. A 148 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Here we go. And there you have it, wheels torqued. Take it for a road test and don't forget to get an alignment.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.